Yuloma and Okonta sat at a corner of the hut beside King Udoka's hut in the night, under the rain. Yuloma was crying and Okonta was consoling her. She was pregnant, and she knew it was not safe for her to be in the palace, because King Udoka was the father of the baby. However, it was no longer a rumor amongst the palace maidens that Yuloma was having an affair with the king. But none of them has the guts to report the incident to Queen Dora, since there was no evidence. Queen Dora was known to be very wicked and intolerant. She has been married to the king for over 20 years without conceiving. She was the daughter of Onowu. Onowu is the man next to the king. It was rumored that Queen Dora married the king to please her father. So, she vowed never to birth any child for King Udoka. She made herself barren so that she would never conceive for the king. Again, in order to secure her place in the palace, she made herself unreachable and untouchable. She made sure to eliminate any woman that got close to the king. However, despite Okonta's love for Yuloma, when he noticed that King Udoka had interest in Yuloma, he used his influence as the king's right-hand man to conceal the affair. Okonta became the middleman between Yuloma and the king. Yuloma was a beautiful, tall and elegant young lady. She is well-mannered that other palace maidens envy her. Nkechi, the chief maiden and the one of the maidens that so much hate Yuloma, was looking for any faults to send Yuloma out of the palace. When Nkechi noticed that Yuloma has turned to the king's personal maiden, she began to tell Yuloma, so as to obtain solid evidence. She failed in several occasions because of constant interference of Okonta. Nkechi couldn't report Yuloma to Queen Dora because she was not well convinced. So that night, Okonta consoled Yuloma to keep calm. He would communicate to the king so they could get her a comfortable place, since the palace was not safe for her. Nkechi had earlier suspected that Yuloma was pregnant. This was because every maiden takes 4 days off in a month during their menstrual flow. So, she noticed that Yuloma had not taken days off for the past 2 months. Nkechi summoned the courage to approach Queen Dora to report her suspicion, because she has been looking for an opportunity to get close to the queen. It was the same night that Yuloma met Okonta regarding the pregnancy. Luckily, Okonta saw Nkechi leaving Queen Dora's quarters night. Okonta decided to keep his guards up, in case of any unusual movement. He kept vigil that night. In the midnight, he noticed some of the guards going to the queen's chamber, so he hurried to the maiden's quarter. He sneaked in and tapped Yuloma. Yuloma followed him immediately without any questions. He took Yuloma's hand and they ran as fast as they could until they got to Okonta's house. Okonta pleaded with his mother to harbor Yuloma for some days. When the guards entered the maiden's quarters, Yuloma has disappeared. They did thorough search around the palace, but she was nowhere to be found. Along the line, Okonta joined them, to divert their suspicion. The next day, Okonta secretly met the king and told him that Yuloma was pregnant. The king was so happy and afraid at the same time because he knew that Yuloma's life would be in danger. He pleaded with Okonta to make some arrangements to send Yuloma to the neighbor community for the safety of both the mother and the baby. Queen Dora sent some guards to Yuloma's father's compound, but she was not found. Yuloma's parents were dragged and harassed, but they knew nothing about Yuloma's whereabouts. Yuloma was accused of stealing from the queen, so she was placed wanted and anybody that found her would be rewarded handsomely. Okonta knew that his house was no longer safe for Yuloma as everyone was in desperate search for her. When Onowu heard that Yuloma was pregnant for King Udoka, he became infuriated. He blamed his daughter, Queen Dora, for her carelessness. Onowu had worked so hard to ensure that the king was childless, so that kingship would be moved out of his lineage. Onowu used both his influence and affluence to intimidate the king. He often threatened to eliminate him, whenever the king goes against his wish. King Udoka has been a puppet to Onowu since he became the king at the age of 20. He knew that Onowu may kill him if he finds out about the pregnancy, so he was fighting with everything in him to save Yuloma and the baby. Onowu doubled the rewards to anybody that finds Yuloma. He even promised a plot of land. It got to a point where some young men started moving from house to house in search of Yuloma. Also, guards patrol round the community every night. However, Okonta was making some moves secretly. He went to Kolu, his best friend, and explained everything to him. He begged Kolu to find some right-minded young men that would help him save Yuloma, for the sake of the king and progress of their community. Kolu convinced 2 young men that were willing to help. Being that they were willing to do anything for their king, these young men kidnapped a young lady from their neighbor community. On the night they intended to take Yuloma, they also took the lady along. As they were moving, some palace guards tried to stop them, but they did not stop. The guards began to pursue them. They handed Yuloma to Okonta, while other 2 young men and the lady they kidnapped took another dimension. Unfortunately, the young men were caught up by the guards, so they began to fight. One escaped, the other guy was caught, and the lady was stabbed during the fight, according to the queen's instruction. Okonta took Yuloma to Kolu, who was waiting for them in a boat at Oi River, the river that connects their community and the neighbor community. Okonta hurried back to the palace. In order not to bear the consequence of killing an innocent girl, the guards told the queen that Yuloma has been killed. The young man that was caught was pardoned by the king, contrary to Onowu's suggestion. Life became so miserable for King Udoka because of many pressures and persuasions from Onowu. Onowu has sworn to be a thorn on the king's flesh, since he found out that King Udoka was looking for means to bear children. King Udoka kept holding on, since he knew his child was on the way. Okonta family remained on the king's side, to ensure that the king was not poisoned nor killed. He occasionally sends Kolu to see Yuloma, to ensure she was safe. Few months later, Yuloma gave birth to a baby boy. The baby was named Udoka too. The king was so pleased to hear the news. He became energized again. King Udoka wouldn't want his son to meet the kind of humiliation he has been passing through in the hands of Onowu, so he decided to stand up and fight. He began to question some of Onowu's authority, especially when he makes decisions without the king's approval. He cancelled every meeting or plan held in his absence. He sacked many of the guards, as they were working for Onowu. With the help of Okonta, he secretly selected and trained new palace guards. He banned the queen from coming to his chambers. Onowu, on the other hand, was also planning on how to dethrone him. After 10 years, the king became sick because of little drop of poison from the kitchen maidens. The poison was slow and has been accumulating for years. The poison has been in the king's body for the past 5 years. When the king was told that most of his organs has been affected by the poison, he knew that his time is limited. He told Okonta that he needed his son, Prince Udoka, around him. Prince Udoka was 10 years old when he was brought to the palace, as a flute boy, not as a prince. Because he may be poisoned as well. Prince Udoka was assigned to blow flute for the king, to make the king happy. Apart from Okonta and the king, no one else knew that the flute boy was the king's son. Being that the king and the flute boy were always together, the king made him take an oath not to disclose anything they discussed to anyone. King Udoka began to teach the boy everything he needed to know about their community. He taught him every secret, wars won and wars lost by their ancestors. The culture, custom and tradition of their people. Apart from being a flute boy, Okonta also taught him how to be a fighter. 5 years in the palace, Prince Udoka has become a very wise, strong and intelligent young man. One day, King Udoka, who had become very weak and bedridden, called the flute boy to make his confession. When the flute boy heard for the first time that he was a prince, and the heir to the throne after his father, he couldn't believe it. Then, he realized why the king loved to have him by his side, why they eat together from the same plate, and why the king taught him so much about the Ogugu community. He was not just happy but also proud of his father, for putting so much effort to ensure his safety. King Udoka promised Prince that he would ensure to eliminate Onowu and purge all his corrupt cabinets. One day, Onowu brought a petition for the king to step down for him, as the king has become bedridden and also impotent. As the king cabinets were contemplating, King Udoka was brought into the palace. The queen, the chief priest, and some old men from different villages in Ogugu community were also invited to the palace by the king. The cabinets were surprised to see the king enter the palace meeting with the flute boy. They were also surprised to see the queen, the chief priest, and some elderly men from different villages in the palace. The king called out Onowu and Queen Dora for eliminating every young woman that tried to conceive for him, including the lady murdered by the guards in place of Uloma. As he was talking, Okonta brought Uloma to the palace. Everybody including the queen was shocked. King Udoka presented the flute boy as his son, birthed to him by Uloma, and the heir to the throne. The chief priest used his ofo to scan the flute boy. Lo and behold, he has a royal blood. King Udoka ordered the immediate arrest of Onowu, Queen Dora and some of his cabinets. He sentenced Onowu and Queen Dora to death by execution and banished those corrupt cabinets. Uloma was crowned the queen. The king appointed Kolu as the next Onowu and Onowu as the king's personal guard. He knew that Prince Udoka would be safe in the hands of both Okonta and Kolu. Onowu and Queen Dora were executed in the village square. A year later, King Udoka died and Prince Udoka was crowned as King Udoka II of Ogugu community. In order to establish a lasting relationship, King Udoka obeyed his father's instruction and got married to Okonta's first daughter, Amoka. That is the end. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to my channel.